So I sat here trying to think about, well, how do I explain like the beginning? Because it's quite difficult to do. And I decided to do it in all these pictures. They all sort of represent something. So I'm going to sort of work across from the left. So this first picture on the left really represented like how I sort of felt at the beginning. Like, it's quite confusing. There's a huge amount of resources and a lot of input very quickly, because obviously you don't have that many training days with them, and you can tell they're so passionate about it. They really want you to kind of get all of it and get access to all of it, and they were really enthusiastic, but it did feel a bit like a tsunami. It was like, oh my goodness, where do we start? So I think that's probably quite normal. Looking back now, you do find your way through it, but at the beginning it did feel a little bit like that. And then there was a lot of thinking. So the second picture, this little boy here having a think, there was a lot of thinking about, well, okay, we've got all of this resource, all of this information, but what works in our context? You know, what are our staff ready for? What's going to work at secondary rather than primary? Because, you know, on the course particularly that I went on, there was more primary dominating. So what's appropriate for different phases? What's appropriate for different subjects as well? Because obviously, you know, just because I'm on leadership, I still sit there with the mindset, I suppose, to a degree of my subject and seeing things through those eyes, and not necessarily am I going to be able to recognise what will work in other subjects and what's going to be successful there. And ultimately what to ignore, because you couldn't do all of it. So really, where do you focus? What do you pick out? I think it's fair to say we probably would have benefited at that point finding out a little bit more about other secondary schools that have been through the journey themselves. We weren't linked up with any, which would have been helpful, you know, thinking about how they approached it. But we then went on to the one that follows underneath, the one about planning. So, you know, there's that real feeling that, you know, you've got to get your value for money out of it, and that pressure about trying to cascade it to staff as quickly as you can, particularly if you've only signed up for the first year. Your time feels quite short to have that impact. So, you know, we'd scheduled right from the September that we would be disseminating this to staff, getting everyone on board, getting it going. And actually, realistically, that was a bit ambitious. We probably should have looked at going for more of a spring or summer start, or even the following autumn, because the difficulty is obviously we had to have some training, and you're trying to train other people before you're even there yourself. And I think that added to a bit of pressure. So I'd definitely recommend, if you went into it, to think about either bringing it in later in the year with people, or even possibly the next year once you are really competent in it yourselves. But we didn't. We went for the whole school in one hit, which is always how I do things, for right or for wrong. But it was a little bit slow because obviously we had to kind of get our training in and get it going. So it probably only really got going from the spring, I think, here in the first year. Picture 4, that one there's everyone excited and enthusiastic. That's genuinely how we felt, actually. I was really chuffed that we managed to sign up to them 3 years with them, and we were finally able to kind of really focus on this. And we really wanted to get everyone on board. So that was really good. At the beginning was really enthusiastic as well. I think that came across to staff, and just making sure we sort of channeled that in the right place, because the training that we were going to give to staff, we only had 4 hours in the whole year, which is so little, really, and thinking really hard about how we got that right and used it to the best effect. Top right is the learning, which went on. There was a huge amount of that, and as I sort of mentioned before, we were in a sense trying to run before we could walk, because we hadn't really got a grip of it ourselves as Oracy champions before trying to get everyone else to be doing it, and that was quite tiring. I would definitely rethink that if we did it again. And then the bottom one is delivering CPD. So, you know, making the most of the time we had and having an impact and thinking about the best way to do that. So, you know, the beginning there's a lot of decisions and a lot of where do we start, as to how I felt. So where did we start? We started essentially by looking at trying to set the vision. I found that quite difficult, actually, at the beginning. So it was, well, do we copy someone else's vision, or is it just that people are doing more Oracy? We sort of struggled with that, and actually we didn't really nail the vision down, I don't think, until year 2, actually, when we launched. We kind of went for that September second year launch with the staff, and I think we then really felt we had pulled that together. But we started with the frameworks. They share an Oracy framework with you, and I'll show you that in a moment. And we found that really helpful in kind of where to start. What do we start with? We went for that. And I think that definitely worked best for us. We filtered through a lot. We really did pull out quite a lot of things and decided that's not going to be for us, or that's not even at that level, but just, it's not speaking to me. That's not jumping out. I mean, that one is. I can see that working. I can literally imagine that with our students, or imagine that in that subject. And, you know, we went for the things that we could really get behind first. Okay, and that's really what message I'd give you is don't worry about trying to do all of it, because you can't, and actually be quite comfortable in choosing what you think is going to work and leaving the rest to the side. You can come back to it later, as we have with some parts of it. Recognize what you can be achieved with what you have, and just do. That's essentially what we did. We just went for, right, we're just going to get started, get everybody doing some oracy, and then actually as you start that, you do find it starts to become clearer, because you start to see where perhaps things are going really well quite quickly and things that aren't, and it starts to sort of tailor the direction you go in, really. And then the last bit of the year, which I think was by far our most positive thing with the staff, and the things the staff talk about the most, is at the end of that first year, we created a sharing opportunity. So we got each department to put forward a person in their team who had done something with oracy, and just literally they ran a table session talking about what they'd done with their students, why it had worked, what they were pleased about, what they've changed since, and how they've used it in the future. And staff were able to kind of go and talk to multiple tables. I think they had 6 in an hour they could go and talk to. And it just allowed that whole crossover from it coming from other people, not just us as the oracy leads. And very quickly we saw that cross sort of pollination of ideas, and it got more momentum as we went into the second year. So I'd really recommend that as well.